Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod. We have Jessica, and today Jessica is crafting authentic brand stories for success. She's founder and the creative director at Jam. She's all about branding and podcasting and growth marketing. Has been doing podcasts and branding and storytelling for the past 12 plus year. Has a background in radio and media, so that one's gonna be fun. It is brought to you by podpar.com. If you want to start or monetize a podcast, go to podpar.com. Jess, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Hey, Charles. Thanks so much for having me on your show. So, I am Jessica Ann, and I'm the founder of Jessica Ann Media, where we work with top brands and organizations to humanize their message. I've been doing this, as you mentioned, for the past 12 years or so, and it's quite a roller coaster of highs and lows. But yeah, I just love it. I love the thrill and the passion that comes with being an entrepreneur and being in service to my clients.
So tell me about these highs and these lows, especially the lows. What do you do when it starts to become challenging in business?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. The lows are really tricky to navigate sometimes. I'm not gonna lie, it's hard, it's brutal. But during those times I really focus on self-care, self-nurturing, really just tapping into, the fact that we can create our own schedules, working out. I go surfing. I actually just went surfing this morning to get out of a bad mood. But really just focusing on all of the essentials like sunshine, being with friends and family, being around my dog, and really just about being in service as much as you can as well, giving back to as many people as we can, and really inviting more play. I think that's something that is often gets overlooked in business is the importance of play and how we can really bring more playfulness into business. And a lot of people, it's hard though sometimes because you want to be taken seriously, but there's such a lightness that happens when we soften and we surrender into the lighter side of life as well.
And why did you get started 12 years ago? Why not continue a 9 to 5?
Oh, I needed to have my own schedule. I worked in corporate. I was in news and journalism prior to launching my own business. So I was living in Washington, D.C. and worked in corporate news media. And I kind of saw how the sausage was cooked. And I didn't really want to be a part of the fear mongering and the pessimism. So I launched my business and I started blogging online. And with the click of a button, I could see whether my content was resonating with my audience. And I love that aspect. I love the immediate gratification of knowing when something is sticky and when it doesn't. And not everything can be a win, but the immediacy of the online digital marketing world was just such a thrill for me. And knowing that I can work from wherever in the world, I just needed my MacBook and a Wi-Fi connection. I just launched my business and I started blogging, and my blog grew pretty quickly. That was back in the days of blogging, of course, and I just loved being able to connect with people and really bring passion and purpose into other people's lives as well. So I continued down that track until blogging sort of fizzled out, maybe like 5 or 7 years into it. And then I launched my own podcast, and just the thrill of self expression, connecting with other people all around the globe, just keeps me going. And it really helps give me the momentum that I need to stay in service to my purpose and my truth.
And what have you seen evolved in the podcasting world in the last decades?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's a great question. In the podcasting world, it's a lot noisier these days. It's definitely a lot more people that are launching their show, but I've also seen the beauty that comes when we really tap into our purpose. And there is a podcast for everyone. And a lot of people come to me and they say, "Oh, it's so noisy out there. How do I set myself apart from the rest of the world?" And I that's what I love helping my clients with, is finding their true purpose and their true vision, and then communicating that out into the world. Because when you do that, it doesn't matter how big your audience is. It's not about audience growth, it's more about your personal growth. And when you reverse engineer your mindset around podcasting, that's when you truly grow, and you'll end up seeing your audience grow when you do the personal work and the personal development first. So that's why I like to focus on that with my clients. We really build that right mindset, and we reverse engineer the business model so that we are set up for success from the start.
I've also seen you've been involved in like NFT and Bitcoin stuff. What attracted you to this?
Oh, so I have a really interesting story. Back when I first started my business, back in 2012, I I joined this little website called Fiverr at the time, and it just so happens to be I just so happened to be in the right place at the right time, and I connected with the co-founder of Ethereum now. His name was Mahai Alasi, and he wanted me involved in Bitcoin back before it was even called Bitcoin. It was called Beyond the Banks. And he's like, "Hey, we're working on this little project. Would you be interested in it?" And he hired me because I have some video production, copy editing experience. And um, I worked with him and his team on this project, and we helped bring Bitcoin into the mainstream consciousness back in 2012. And since then, I was kind of hooked. I really just appreciate the altruism behind it, and really the removing yourself from the system. And I believe in freedom and sovereignty. So those are my values, and that's really what has kept me going. And I also was involved with NFT marketing back in 2020. When you're a part of these early stage phases in the industry, it gets you hooked, and and I love being kind of on the pulse of what's next. And when you feel into that, it's kind of like riding a wave. I just got back from surfing, so forgive the analogy, but it's like, you're just kind of like looking out over the horizon, seeing what waves are coming next, so you can be prepared and you can position yourself to really be a success, not just for your own success, but for your clients and really your team and for your colleagues. Just kind of being in that mix has been really fun and fruitful.
Have you always been like a freedom seeker slash a thinker and consciousness explorer? What kind of journey have you gone through in your life so far?
Yeah, I really have. I mean, like I mentioned, I was in corporate back in the day, my former life in Washington, D.C., and I have that behind me to know that that's not really what I want. I really just wanted more expansiveness, more of the freedom type of lifestyle that comes from running an online business, a virtual business. So yeah, I have kind of been that way for a long time, but I learned the hard way. I learned through contrast that that's what I really wanted. If I didn't have the contrast of a 9 to 5, fluorescent lights, being ass in chair mentality, reporting to a boss all the time, I would not know. Like I just wouldn't appreciate what I have now. So every day I'm grateful that I figured out how to do it on my own, and I have autonomy. And my clients are my bosses, obviously, but running your own business, you can pretty much work your own hours and not under the constraints of anyone that's managing your process. So I have been like that for quite some time now, but it's only really through contrast that you can appreciate what you have.
Right. And what walls have you hit that brought you on that path to consciousness?
Oh gosh, back in the day, I worked at Sirius XM Radio, and I got laid off from that role, and that was really hard to kind of go from the security to nothing. And then I worked at a nonprofit as well after that, and I got laid off from that job as well. So I saw how easily that stability can get taken away from a job. And I said, you know what, I never want to really rely on external circumstances to predict my future. And even if I am self-employed, I'm on my own, at least it's my own karma, it's my own doing. I'm in my own purpose. And as tricky as it can be, and as really as scary as it can be sometimes, I kind of always remember that like no one has their future perfectly mapped out. There is no certainty in anyone's life. So I kind of am riding the thrill of the roller coaster of entrepreneurship with that knowing and that experience behind me, knowing that even the most stable jobs don't always have security.
Have you got what you wanted out of entrepreneurship? Like you've set goals for yourself a decade ago, most likely. Are you like the very best version of yourself right now?
Oh, I wish. I'm always working on improving. I'm really hard on myself, so I always know, and I'm very introspective and self-aware, so I never feel like I'm good enough for my own self. It's a blessing and a curse. Living out here on the West Coast in California has allowed me to be a little bit more laid back and a little bit easier on myself than I was living on the East Coast, where I was a lot more type A personality. So I've taken that drive and the ambitiousness that I had, and I now have that lifestyle of, okay, like I've accomplished a lot and I'm content. I still want that ambition. I still want that drive. I still need to see results and have success. But I kind of frame it a little differently than I did previously. Everyone has different definitions of success. And my definition of success, like, is, do I have the lifestyle that I want? Am I surrounded by community? Am I just in awe every day of this beautiful, magical life? Do I take time to reflect? Am I giving back? Am I in service? And a lot of times, yes, every day I pinch myself that I have that lifestyle that I've always dreamed of. And I'm grateful for that every day. And yeah, there are moments when I'm like, I want to do more. How can I give back more? How can I improve the world more? And I think, that comes with the territory of just knowing, striking that balance of being content with your life, but then also pursuing your future goals and continuing with more ambitions for the future.
You run the Art of Humanity and Two Ends podcast or
Mhm.
YouTube channel that I can see here. What was your
Mhm.
thesis behind that podcast? And do you feel you've reached most of your goals on that level?
Yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely. So I launched my podcast back in 2015 under that same premise of self-expression and gratitude and serendipity, which was like really the leading forces of the internet. It's like, okay, like we're connected. How can we make the most of it? And I really am grateful for having that vehicle as a path to self-expression, because I find that the voice is such a powerful mechanism for sharing your truth, for communicating your values, for connecting with your audience. The right people will resonate with your message at the right time. And it doesn't matter how big the audience is. If you have something you want to share, then you can share it on an episode. And I have kind of gone against the mainstream marketing way of doing a podcast, in that I run my podcast based on seasons, and I publish when I have something of value to share. And it kind of goes against the more, broy kind of marketing style where you just churn it out every day, you hustle. And I like to align instead of hustle. So I like to really feel in alignment with what I want to share, get really in integrity with my vision, and then communicate from that place of like, actually, this is a nugget of wisdom that I can't keep in anymore. And I want to publish this episode and share my truth around that. And absolutely, I've accomplished my goals because I've interviewed my heroes on my show. People reach out to me all the time and they say, how did you get people like Seth Godin on my show? I've had Douglas Rushkoff on my show. I've had some of these people that have absolutely changed my life on my podcast. And I just love giving back in that way, where I can have a conversation with my heroes and then in turn transform the lives of my listeners. And then it just is a magical way of being in this world. And that's the strategy that I like to teach my podcast students as well, because when they interview their heroes, it's the same thing. It's kind of like a paying it forward in a way when you have your own podcast, because you interview your heroes, you spark your own transformation through publishing your show. And then in turn, your listeners are lit up and they're on fire because they're like, wow, like this podcast host is incredible. And they share your episode more organically and more authentically because you're doing it from a place of integrity and authenticity.
So it seems you handpick your guests, the questions, you prepare something, or do you have a couple of intro questions and then it's in the moment question slash conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really depends on the guest. Historically, I have pretty much read all of my guests' books before I've interviewed them. I kind of geek out on my guests before I interview them. And um, having my show and my interview with them is a way for me to embody the knowledge of the books that they've written. So not only do I like read the books, I actually interview the authors so that I can actually build more embodiment into the work instead of just checking it off a box. A lot of people just see a podcast as like, okay, it's content, let me check it off a box. But for me personally and professionally, I enjoy reading all the books with my guests and then going really deep into some of the topics that they discuss. And in that way, I really find that you can stand out from the other shows because you're asking questions that other podcast hosts don't ask. And it brings unique stories out of your guests in that way because you've done your research and it's not the typical cliche questions that they always get.
What do you want to accomplish this year? What do you have in front of you? There's like 6 months left. Uh, Goals, business, personal. What do you want to get done this year?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really want to go all in on my podcast program. It's my signature program called Resonance, the quantum way to start your podcast. And I really want to get as many people signed up for that as possible because I truly believe in podcasting, especially as we're nearing the start of 2025 in just a few months. It's only going to get noisier out there. And the way that you can really stand out and build your business is by having a podcast and to really nurture those conversations that need to happen in this world. It's so important to really tap into our wisdom today and to really feel our intuition. And a podcast is the best way to tap into that and to share your light with the world. So to answer your question, I really want to get the right people for my podcast program. I don't accept just any students into my program. So, there needs to resonate and they need to be the right fit. And if you're feeling that you want to start a podcast, something that I love to do is to bring you into my vortex and to make magic.
Authenticity seems to be a problem nowadays in business, especially. How do you advise your clients on keeping it authentic? Because most think in this professional world, they need to sort of have a mask or adopt some personality or some behaviors that will get them paid more. Is that truth? Is that a myth? And yeah, what's your take on authenticity on the business and life side of things?
Yeah, I think that that's overall, as a whole, it's a myth. I mean, obviously, there's times and places to share your vulnerability and your authenticity. When you're going through something, I think you want to share from a place of a scab. You want that wound to heal. You don't want to be, if you're going through a divorce or something really awful, you don't want to be broadcasting your life out into the world. And you want to get to a place where you're like, okay, I'm healed enough to share my story. But I think the magic truly happens is when we do share those really personal stories, those times that were dark, and you come out on the other side and you share your light. So I think that's a really fine line to know when to do that, and the right coach can kind of help you navigate that. And I think we need more of that. We need more personal expression. We need more vulnerability. We need to take off our masks. I know how it feels. I used to work in the corporate world, and I know that you kind of have to keep your head down and say the right things and be seen a certain way. But I am here to tell you that on the other side of that, it is empowering and it is invigorating. And that's truly what lights the world up, is when you are lit up from the inside and you share your magic. And that can't happen when you're wearing a mask.
Yeah, I feel a lot of people have problems getting through these things altogether. Maybe they don't ever share these things because the wound is still very much hurting them and they don't really know how to go through these things and fully heal. They don't know about modalities, for example, breath work, meditation, psychedelics, retreats, physical activity, matter of fact, and just going through these things. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, those are all good tools and techniques to use. And there's no right way. You have to do what works for you. So I think when you kind of come away from the corporate world, or you can kind of go down your own individual path, and there's no right or wrong path. Everyone is on their own journey. And I think when you do use these tools, personally, I like to use yoga and surfing and meditation to really tap into that innate wisdom that's in all of us. And we all have it. We all have intuition. We all have empathy. We all have these like amazing characteristics inside of us. So it's about using those tools and getting out of our own way, and then hiring the right person when you need to get out of your own way if you can't do it on your own.
On your side, what does your daily routine looks like? Any habit stacking that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to get outside first thing in the morning, be in natural sunlight as early as possible. I like to read, and just if I'm not in the right mental space on waking up, I like to read something inspiring or something that'll help me get in the right place. And then I like to journal and work out. I'll either go for a run on the beach, go swimming in the ocean, surfing, or hiking, or do yoga. Really, movement is a big part of my daily practice as well.
All right, I think I lost you for the last couple of seconds here, but yeah, I heard most of it. And any books or learning resources that you have for CEOs, founders that have brought you to the next level lately?
One of my favorite books of all time is Power versus Force. It's a book by David Hawkins, and it's kind of like my go-to when I need to realize the power that's within us. And it's not about force. And a lot of marketing people see it as forceful. Oh, you have to email, you have to really, is it really loud? There's a landscaper in the background. um, so really what it comes down to is when you're in your own power, you just need to be communicating, and you don't really, there's not a lot of force that's necessary. And that's one of my all-time favorite books, Power versus Force. And I like the Bhagavad Gita. I like spirituality books. They keep me pretty grounded and centered in my purpose.
If we double click on meditation and yoga, like any tips for us? I feel that most people can't focus really on their breaths and concentrate on one specific thing. So what are your hacks to get into a deep state in probably 10 or 15 minutes?
Yeah, honestly, start small. And even if you don't know what you're doing, or if you're not sure if you're doing it right, you probably are, and just keep consistent with it. And I know it can feel terrifying at first if you aren't familiar with a lot of your inner world, or if you're not familiar with being in your own thoughts. It is kind of scary at first, but the consistency helps. And even if you can just start with 5 minutes and build up to a 10 or 15, 20-minute practice, you'll do that through consistency.
Well, thank you for today, Jess. Where can people find out more about you?
Thanks so much for having me, Charles. You can go to my website, artofhumanity.io, and jessicaannmedia.com. And that's JESSICANN, two N's, media.com.